Prof. Kinabo, over to you.
Thank you, Kanto. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Welcome to day 2 of the FANRPAN 2022 Regional Multi-Stakeholder Policy Dialogue. This is being conducted virtually across the continent. And we have translation facilities for 3 main languages that are used in this meeting, English, French, and Portuguese. And therefore, feel free to connect to interpreter or translation that will be comfortable for you. And few session issues that I would like to make now before we proceed is to remind presenters and speakers to observe time when they're making their presentations and stick to the time allocated for that particular presentation. And for those who will be asking questions or making comments, please provide your comments and questions in a concise format so that we have more time for discussion. So without further ado, I would like now to invite Mr. Shiluva Kanyani from FANRPAN to make a presentation on a recap of day 1. Ms. Shiluva, over to you. Hello.
Hi, Shiluva, you might be muted if you are speaking. Ms. Shiluva.
Shiluva seems not to be here. Probably it's a load shedding issue, but she'll be coming back soon.
Who is this? Shiluva.
Yes, Shiluva. I think it's a load shedding issue.
Okay.
Probably she'll be coming back soon though.
Right. So how soon that would be, we do not know. Probably while we are waiting for Shiluva to come on, I would like to introduce now the theme for today. The theme for today is shifting to sustainable and healthier diets. And we all know that we have a significant challenge currently, that accessibility and consumption of healthy diets is a huge challenge to many of our people. And what we have also observed is that our food systems currently are not providing sustainable health diets. This is basically caused by the food environment that is not really responding to what we want to see as far as foods that are available on the market and foods that can be consumed. So in this session, we want to see how can we now shift towards sustainable and healthier diets. And while we do that, I think we need to also remember what happened to our traditional diets that we used to consume, and suddenly we are in this situation. Now we want to shift either back to our kind of diets or to new sustainable diets. I think this is what is going to be discussed today. And during the discussion, I think we need also to consider what are the policy issues that we need to take on board so that at the end of the day, we really have, we achieve a sustainable and healthier diets. So key topics to be discussed, including, first of all, making sustainable health diets affordable for all, which is a huge challenge at the moment. And secondly, the second topic is stimulating demand for nutritious foods. It seems that we have demand for other foods that are not that nutritious. So how can we stimulate demand so that people can actually opt for nutritious foods? And another topic is about improving dietary and health data for decision making. And obviously, this is a huge challenge at the moment in our continent of trying to get dietary intake data is a huge challenge. So even making policies or even interventions can be very tricky if we don't have this information during our decision-making process. So this is what is going to happen today. I wonder whether Shilova has managed to connect. If not, can I ask probably another rapporteur that was working with Shilova to make a presentation on her behalf?
All right, thank you, Prof. Kinabo. I think in South Africa, the load shedding is really an issue. So, okay, so we will be sharing the highlights from yesterday. So yesterday, we had a wonderful session and openings of the day. The theme of the day was accelerating climate resilience. And we had our board chairperson opening the session, following by the welcome remarks of our CEO, and we had that day convened with Climb It. So yesterday, Dr. Inga Jacobs Mata Ukama from the International Water Management Institute delivered a keynote presentation on unlocking African ingenuity in research, SMEs collaboration, the 4 Ps, scaling pathways to resilient agri-food systems and accelerated growth. This was followed by reflection from the private sector, Mr. Edgar Nhlanhla, sorry for the pronunciation, Mashinini, from the Southern African Business Development Forum. The closing session of the day focused on Africa's preparedness for the UNFCCC's COP27 taking place in Egypt in November. So participants received presentation on the history of agriculture, on food system in climate discussions and what to expect in Egypt by Vibe Smith, the program and policy specialist at Climb It, and remarks on priorities for COP27 from Rafik Aini, the chief agriculture negotiator from the African group of negotiator. So the findings were that the summary of the findings were the understanding the risk appetite of different investors in the agribusiness industry is key, and that shapes who are eligible for funding. The private sector has a role to play in the capacity strengthening of young entrepreneurs, such as young interns. Also, climate finance in Africa is in the low billions, while the food systems are in the trillions. Therefore, their need to concentrate on the food systems. Also, Africa plays a very small role in climate change as such countries that have made wealth over climate change need to be made accountable. And on that, FANRPAN is a key component in the transition, but there is need to go beyond dialogues to deal with actions on the ground. There is also need to leverage opportunities for implementing projects through capacity building of farmers on the ground, and the role of public resource management need to cross-cut issues in public management, and initiatives should align with endorsement in Africa, for example, using social innovation to attract youth. And there is need to also break down the silos and instead work together to make our food system more sustainable from the domestic to global level. So the last one is that COP27 focuses more on implementation action. Therefore, there's a need to shift from thinking solution to implementing them on the ground. So those are the highlights from day one yesterday. Over to you, Prof. Kinabo.
Thank you very much, Kanto. And I think we all agree that the rapporteurs captured important points that were raised yesterday and in preparation for COP27 in Egypt later this year. So let us now move on, and we're starting our session now. And I would like to invite Professor Hetty to present a keynote speech about shifting to sustainable health diets, improving dietary and health data for decision making. Over to you, Professor Hetty.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to put it on slideshow. Thank you. Can you see my screen? Can you see me? I don't seem to see my picture.
We see your screen, but not your picture.
Yes, we see the screen.
Okay, there we go. So thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you, Madam Chair, for also introducing me. And without further ado, let me start presenting. So we do know that moderate or severe food insecurity has been increasing in the past 6 years and now affects more than 30% of our world population. But if we look at this particular graph, we can see that the prevalence of severe food insecurity has increased from 9.3% in 2019 to 11.7% in 2021, with the equivalent of 207 million more people in a period of 2 years. And this is actually of great concern, particularly if we look at our own continent that has really is outperforming all the other regions in the world in terms of severe food insecurity and moderate food insecurity. And I do think that we as a continent recognize that in our daily lives, that we can see that there are so much more call on us to become involved and to help assist finding solutions as for Africa, from Africa, as there's also a kind of a donor fatigue when we are looking at what we have to contribute. Mandu, I see your hand is up. Do you want to add something, or can I continue? You are muted.
You're muted, Mount.
Okay, let me continue. So what are the drivers of food insecurity? Now, we know that undernourishment is the outcome of food insecurity, and that conflicts such as we are seeing currently with the Ukrainian war are affecting an enormous amount of people around the world. It's approximately 74 million people, 2/3 of whom face acute food insecurity. We know that the conflict is also causing economic shocks, and that it's a driver of acute food insecurity for 10.2 million people. And if we just reflect in the recent past, what has happened during COVID-19, how many job losses has happened, and climate and natural disasters are also playing a role. We just think about the recent flooding in certain areas in the world. So these all affect economic growth and therefore also indirectly affect undernourishment and vice versa. So if we look at climate change specifically, in this report of the Goalkeepers 2022, which is actually being released this afternoon, we can see that the prediction of climate change is that heat stress will have a severe impact on the production of staple crops, and particularly on maize in sub-Saharan Africa in the years to come. If we just look at what is predicted for Nigeria, we can also see that the optimal rainfall will go down according to these predictions, and that will also affect the ability to produce enough maize for the population. On the other hand, we know that adult obesity is rising globally at an accelerating pace, and that this picture is from the State of Food Security and Nutrition in 2017, but a recent report in the Conversation actually did a costing of obesity for our South African government, and it is in the order of $1.9 billion a year, which is approximately 15% of our government's health expenditure. So that it really has a severe effect also eventually on food insecurity. So if we look at the nutrition indicators for children under 5 years, we know that there are 3 phases of malnutrition. We have stunting. This is where children are too short for their age. We have wasting, where children are actually too thin for their height. And then we have this growing number of children under 5 years that are actually also now reported as being overweight. And if we look at, and so that figure is really growing, and it is of a major concern because we know that it affects children's, as they are growing up, it will affect them also in a lifelong way, their ability to move around and to have optimum health. So the wasting figures worldwide, unfortunately, has climbed now during COVID-19. It was the one figure that everyone was very proud that was going down worldwide, but unfortunately, this is no longer the truth. And stunting is, of course, something that all countries in Africa are trying to bring down, but with figures of 35 to 45% of children being stunted in many African countries, we know that these children will never reach their full potential. They will never develop their cognitive abilities to the extent that they should. So this is really not a good picture that we are seeing. So what are the nutrition indicators then for children? We know that stunting, wasting, and obesity are very often associated with the concomitant micronutrient deficiencies. And our most prevalent deficiencies in childhood is vitamin A deficiency, iron, zinc, and iodine. And the first 24 months of a child's life represent a critical window of opportunity for intervention. So nutrition must become a primary objective within governments and developing organizations. And it must become more and more a primary objective. And as we know, the Sustainable Development Goal Target 2.2 specifically focus on nutrition that can contribute to factors that are critical for meeting the SDGs, such as sustainable food production, strong health systems, quality education, equality and inclusion, and peace and stability. So how do we link agriculture, food security, and human health? Now, one thing has always been very clear that our agricultural food systems are not nutrition driven. And this is something that has to be addressed because we are producing too much energy. And in the end, that energy is consumed and that increases the incidence of overweight, obesity, and our non-communicable diseases. Low dietary variety indicates low quality of a diet, and it means that there's a low intake of essential nutrients. And then low dietary quantity and quality increases then subsequently the prevalence of undernutrition. So while the exact makeup of a healthy diet varies depending on individual characteristics as well as cultural context, locally available foods and dietary customs, the basic principles of what constitutes a healthy diet are still the same. So if we look at on the left-hand side at enough food and energy, you can see it's quite a bleak picture in the top picture, and that was according to the National Food Consumption Survey that was done in South Africa a very long time ago in 1999. Gladly, we have just done a new one, and hopefully those results will be out next year. But you can see that that's not a colorful diet. It's actually very bleak, and it mostly consists of starches. Where the picture at the bottom is much more that you, it looks very colorful, but if you actually analyze that diet, you will also see that it mostly consists of high processed, high fat, high salt, and high sugar drinks. So, and that is the driving the obesity to a large extent in our lower and middle income countries as well as in first world countries. So enough nutrients is depicted on the right-hand side. As you can see, it's a much more colorful balance of food components in the diet. It contains not only starches, it contains fruits and vegetables, and also small amounts of proteins. So the diets of the poor and developing countries usually just consist of very high amounts of staple foods such as maize, wheat, and rice, and very few micronutrient-rich foods such as fruits, vegetables, and animal products. Now, which brings us to why is this true? Is it, and many people will say, but healthy diets are unaffordable. And particularly now after COVID, there was such a shock to the food system where many people lost their jobs or were paid less or were unable to go to work because they were ill and to attain a reasonable income. So currently 57% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa cannot afford a healthy diet. But diets high in ultra-processed foods supply a high percentage of total energy intake and may be cheaper than diets that contain more nutrient-dense foods. So availability and affordability of ultra-processed food can explain, at least partly, this shift towards unhealthy dietary patterns. What are our options to improve physical and economic access to healthy and sustainable diets? So first of all, policies and practices. We have to adopt in-country policies and programs to decrease less healthy ingredients, such as policies to decrease trans fats, sodium reduction regulations, and to make unhealthy foods more expensive, such as sugar tax on sugar-sweetened beverages, which has been implemented in 39 countries in the world. But our main issue is, as nutritionists, is that tax must not become a fiscal income, but must actually be used to promote healthier diets to the population at large. And then how to increase the nutritional value of what people are consuming. And here we are thinking about micronutrient fortification. We in South Africa, we have sub-Saharan Africa, in fact, many of our staple foods are fortified with a mix of these nutrients that are not in the diet in enough quantities, such as the B vitamins, the minerals, and vitamin A. And then biofortified staple crops also creates an opportunity to actually consume a high intake of nutrients that are at risk. And then subsidies on healthier foods. We know that some countries, such as South Africa, we have 16 foods that are exempt from the general tax, which makes it 16% cheaper to attain. So if we look at other macronutrient interventions, we have, given the wide prevalence of multiple macronutrient deficiencies in malnourished populations in developing countries, the challenge is to implement intervention strategies that combine appropriate infant and young child feeding with micronutrients interventions at scale. So 4 major intervention strategies are available for the control of micronutrient malnutrition, and these are the supplementation of specific micronutrients. We think of a vitamin A supplementation that was rolled out worldwide by GAIN in the 2000s, and the fortification of foods with micronutrients, and then agricultural and horticultural interventions to increase the production of micronutrient-rich foods, as well as nutrition education to ensure healthy dietary choices. So which fiscal policy interventions can be used? So this is a mechanism to influence consumer purchasing behavior. And there we've already spoken a little bit about the price decrease on healthy foods. We've pooled results of 22 intervention studies indicated that there was a 12% increase in consumption for every 10% decrease in price. So yes, it does really work. And fruits and vegetables were the food group that were the most commonly taught. Mohammed, I think yes, okay. So low fruit and vegetable intake is a risk factor for NCDs, and the WHO recommends that we should eat at least 400 grams of that per day. But we know that the fruit and vegetable consumption is lower in rural and informal urban areas than in urban areas, and it could be due to availability. But the low intake of fruit and vegetables can result in low dietary fiber intake and deficiencies of macronutrients. So what is important is to strengthen the nutrition knowledge of the population, and therefore we really appeal to governments that we include nutrition education in school curricula already from and as well as from a very young age. and then as well as to include it at prenatal and antenatal clinics, to have food-based dietary guidelines per country, to have mass media campaigns on to improve nutrition knowledge of the general population, and also to have behavior changing interventions. We have to increase the awareness of the nutritional advantages of indigenous and underutilized crops or wild foods, and promote traditional food culture and preparation techniques. So, and how can we improve dietary and health data for decision making? Because we know that reliable information, including data on dietary diversity, is critical in addressing malnutrition. And therefore, we need adequate and accurate and reliable data on nutrition and health. And that is lacking in specific contexts. And we need to hinder accountability and progress towards meeting the nutrition targets. So just to briefly say that we know that consumers are taking in different staple foods, and particularly our low-income consumer, in fact, are very sensitive to price. And this affects the nutrients that are consumed in the diet. So in my concluding remark, I just want to highlight how can we shift to sustainable and healthier diets. First of all, we should make nutrition indicators a priority and use effective monitoring and tracking tools to further facilitate the decision-making and planning for future nutrition programs. We also have a critical need for developing cost-efficient methods of generating multi-dimensional nutrition data on immediate determinants of malnutrition, as well as nutrition-sensitive interventions. And then we needed data presented in persuasive ways and interpretive ways can be developed to raise awareness about nutrition issues among the key stakeholders and thereby influencing the decision-making process. And with that, I would like to thank you, and over to our chair.
Thank you very much, Professor Hetty. First of all, for keeping to time, 20 minutes exactly. And that gives us much more time to proceed with other discussions. And you have highlighted very important things, and probably one that has shocked me is about the stunting level in Africa. 144 million children are stunted, and that's about the population of West Africa, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania combined. That's a huge number of people who are stunted, and something has to be done. Is it diet? Is it poor diet? Is it something else? And you have clearly shown that drivers of food insecurity are multidimensional, and they all act on the same individual at the end of the day to cause poor nutritional status. This is very shocking information, and I hope during the discussion people bring in more policy issues that need to be observed so that we address these problems. For those who have questions, you can put your questions on the chat box, but we'll have a session later on. For now, let me invite our panelists. We have a panel discussion, and we have our panelists, Dr. Hester from Bureau for Food and Agriculture Policy, and Dr. Gloria Eslifi from University of Ghana. They'll be discussing various issues related to our keynote presentation. Dr. Hester will discuss about making sustainable health diets affordable for all. This is about nutrient quality, food baskets, and pricing options. And later on, Dr. Gloria will talk about how to stimulate demand for nutritious food and improve nutrition data for decision making. So, Dr. Hester, please, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Chair, for the introduction. Good morning, everybody. I just want to check that everybody can hear me clearly.
Yes,
And
we
I want
can.
to
Yes, we can.
perfect, and I want to share my screen. Just a second. Okay, can everybody see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, great, fantastic. Okay, so my first slide gives a bit of an overview of the various aspects that's been putting pressure on food affordability. Prof. Hetty has already touched on many of these. I'm just going to go over this really quickly. There on the right-hand side of the slide, we see many of the stress factors currently driving up food prices, things like the residual impacts of the COVID pandemic, climatic variability and shocks like droughts and flooding, the lingering impact as well of the Russian-Ukraine war, that had a particular impact on vegetable oil prices as well as major grain prices, things like animal diseases, foot and mouth disease, avian influenza, and so on, and various factors causing supply chain breakages and inefficiencies. Now, all of these factors are really pushing up food prices. And we see that if you look at the bar on the left-hand side, the gray bars, you see the inflation rate on the FAO food price index since August 21 till July 22. And we can see tremendously high inflation rates observed globally and benchmark against that, we can see the food inflation rates in Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa specifically, where we can see for all those countries, food prices, especially in the last couple of months, really increasing tremendously. Just adding on to Prof. Hetty's point about the massive impact of the COVID pandemic on the gains that was made up until now in terms of food and nutrition security. This is the graph on the right-hand side is a projection of what could happen to the millions of poor people globally, worst case scenario. So if you look at the red dotted line, you can see that predictions that it can be really detrimental to food and nutrition security globally if the most pessimistic projections come true. So let's move on to the next slide. So given all these things, it's so important to understand the affordability of healthy eating. And over the last couple of years at BFAB, we've been developing a methodology, and that was also part of my PhD, where we looked at models to get to a basic healthy food basket, which can then be applied to monitor the affordability of healthy eating, and also to use that information in creative ways to improve food and nutrition security within various countries. Now, this is an illustration of this basic model that was then within the RUACAB Foods project and Work Package B2 applied or extended from not only South Africa, but to also include Kenya and Ghana to develop a model of basic healthy eating for these countries. Now, all of these models depart from the official dietary guidelines for the particular countries. Now, in the case of South Africa and Kenya, we had guidelines to work on. In the case of Ghana, we relied more on in the absence of country-specific guidelines, on the WHO guidelines for healthy eating. Now, once you have that, you need other building blocks. The first one being the characteristics of your reference household, the size and composition in terms of genders and age group and so on, because it affects the nutrient needs of the people in that household. Then also you need to understand in as much detail as possible the food preferences of consumers within the country. And that goes on a national level, but also distinguishing between subgroups, for example, rural versus urban or specific regions. Then you need to understand what do you define as a single serving unit, giving the design of the eating plans. And then by applying the first four building blocks, you will then get to certain food quantities required per month and within the particular basket. And to that, you can then apply food price data. Now, food price data can be really challenging. In South Africa, we've had recent expansions of the food prices monitored, and it's quite an elaborate list, but there are still things that we are suggesting that could be added things like more soya-based foods and more legume-based foods to further look at more planetary diets. But then, for example, in countries like Kenya and Ghana, the existing available food prices only allow for a very limited basket to be compiled. So what we had to do in those countries is to supplement the official nationally observed food prices with some, I would almost like to call it online spot checks of major retailers doing online food sales in those countries to at least get a more comprehensive healthy food basket for those countries. And then you get to a cost for that basket. And once you have that cost, you can contrast that to household income to really assess affordability. And there on the side, to the right-hand side of this the scheme, you can just see that then we apply food composition data to make sure that the nutritional profile of these baskets are adequate. Touching on the issue of food price availability, this is just an example where we can see in the case of Ghana specifically, the items listed in red are all those items that was included in the food baskets in Ghana, but not monitored in terms of official food prices. So we see a definite research gap there. Okay, so let's look at some of these baskets. Firstly, let's look at the Ghana food basket. On the slide, you can see pictures of all the various elements that were included in this basket, and the list of food items. You can see it covers all the major food groups. I'm not going to read through all the foods in the consideration of time. This basket was priced at approximately 2,185 Ghanaian cedi, or approximately $221 for a reference family of 4 a month. That's consisting of 2 adults, a smaller child, and a bit of an older child. And to what sort of affordability did this really translate? Now in Ghana, we are still trying to find better household income data. This is the best that we could find up until now. So our results show that if we divide the population into 5 groups, the second most wealthy group, or quintile 4, will have to spend approximately 60% of their income on this basket of food, which is an extremely high food expenditure share. For a dual minimum wage income household, they will have to spend approximately 48% of their income to be able to afford this basket. And a quintile 5 household, in other words, wealthiest 20%, will have to spend 39% of their income on this basket to be able to afford it, where usually you will have food expenditure shares of 5 to 10% for your wealthiest households in your population. So we can see that the huge challenge associated with affording basic healthy eating in Ghana. Just quickly touching on the nutritional adequacy of this basket, protein contributed 13% of energy contributions, fat 20%, and it met the DRIs for a wide range of vitamins and minerals. With the only big constraint being calcium, due to the fact that the dairy product included in the basket, milk powder, is really priced quite high in Ghana. And if I increased the milk intake, the level of expense of the basket just shot up so significantly that the affordability was really deemed even more problematic. Okay, so let's move on to Kenya. So once again, in the pictures, you can see illustrations of all the various products included in this basket. You can see it's a wide range of products, including all the food groups once again. Now, the costing of this particular basket came to about 33,745 Kenya shillings, or US dollars 283 for the reference household of 4 per month, with the rural basket based on typical rural intake patterns and food preferences, 12% less expensive, and the urban basket about 11% more expensive, with that difference attained to differences in the products included, and it also in terms of urban consumers usually seeking a bit more variety in their food choices within the food groups, and not due to differences in food prices, as at this stage it's not possible to distinguish between rural and urban food prices on the available data. Then if we look at this in terms of affordability, we estimate that a dual minimum wage income household will not be able to afford this, and it will absorb about 21% of the upper limit of middle income consumers. That's described as about 160,000 Kenya shillings, which is, it's okay, but considering that that's the upper limit of the middle class, we see once again that also in Kenya, there's a big concern regarding the affordability of healthy food. Now, for South Africa, I'm presenting a slightly different picture because we have time series data availability. Now, just on the left, you can see all the various products that's included in the South African basket. In South African terms, it comes to about 4,300 Rand or US dollars 251 for the reference household. And the graph on the right-hand side illustrates in the red bars the cost of the basic healthy food basket over time for 2021 and 2022. And then the inflation rate on that basket, and also the inflation on food and non-alcoholic beverages as measured by the CPI. So there we can see that with the availability of time series data, we can start doing some interesting analysis. For example, compare healthy food affordability to general CPI, inflation, and those type of things. What we can also do, if we have a nice representation of the entire socioeconomic spectrum, it's possible to get to those brackets where the baskets can become affordable. Now, in the graph on the left-hand side, you can see for each expenditure decile of the population, in other words, each 10% of the total population, their estimated monthly income levels. We can see that to afford in South Africa, we have another very basic food basket that we call the BFAP Thrifty Healthy Food Basket, which is a healthy food basket that's suggested by the Department of Health, but that's got a slight larger staple component than the basket that was presented on the previous slide, just to get sort of a lower limit basic healthy eating. Now, if you look at the two red dotted lines there on the graph, that's the income that will be, yes?
Time?
Yes, I'm almost done.
Okay.
You can see a range of affordability income levels that will exclude basically 40 to 60, 70% of the population from basic healthy eating in a country, depending on what you're looking at. Just a quick last remarks in terms of recommendations, lessons learned. We see major concerns in terms of the available nationally monitored food prices, so there's some room for improvement. When these things are in place, it enables us to monitor these aspects on a monthly basis and get the information out there so that the policymakers and the powers to be can see what's going on and react accordingly. There's a huge need to better understand disaggregation in terms of regions or provinces or counties in the target country. So there's some more follow-up research that needs to be done. We need to really consider the availability of healthy foods to understand those things in the target countries. And on a consumer level, there's a lot to be done in terms of understanding whether consumers really understand healthy eating. I'm going to stop there. Hopefully I can answer the question that pops up, but I would like to appreciate everybody for your time. And there is my email address if anybody is interested in contacting me afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Esther. And this is very stimulating in the sense that everybody now will be thinking about their pockets and their purses as to whether when they walk out of their household on that particular day, whether they will be able to afford anything from the list that you have shown there. But I'm sure this information can be very useful in trying to help countries to set up like minimum wages as to how much should a minimum wage be in order to for households to afford or an individual to afford a nutritious diet. So this is towards a very, is pointing towards a very good direction in terms of looking at incomes as well as debts. So thank you very much for that presentation, and I'm sure it will stimulate a lot of discussion after this. Now let me invite Dr. Gloria from Ghana to present on how to stimulate demand for nutritious food. I think demand for nutritious food has gone down. So how do we position ourselves to ensure that, you know, consumers are stimulated to demand for nutritious diet? Over to you, Dr. Gloria.
Thank you very much, Prof. Kinabu. Can you hear me, please?
So, yes, loud and clear.
Okay, great. Yeah, so thank you for inviting me, and thank you for me to giving me the opportunity to share my perspectives on how we can stimulate demand for nutritious food and improve nutrition data for decision making. And so, as I have been, you've been told, I'm Gloria Sophie, and I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana. So the good thing about being the last person to present is that it's mainly a repetition of what everybody has talked about. And so Prof. Hetty has given us the picture of what the nutrition situation in Africa. And actually the report tells us that Africa is, actually sub-Saharan Africa, is not on track to achieving any of its nutrition and hunger indicators by 2030, which is a real big blow. And so there has to be a lot that has to be done in the process. Now, when it comes to stimulating nutritious food, we find out that if, for instance, we went into the junk food joints or the fast food joints that are available in our various countries or cities now, we find out that the most people you find there would be the youth and then the children who actually need to have a more nutritious diet. You know, of course we all do, but they need it more to grow up. But then you find them there. And so then you realize that they seem to be more, excuse me, I have a cold. They seem to be more interested in those kind of foods. And so we have to try to get them to eat the nutritious foods, even if we have to try and sort of trick them into eating some of those, eating food that looks like the ones that they want to eat. So in my mind, in my perspective, these are mainly my perspectives, has nothing to do with the University of Ghana, even though I work there. So these are my perspectives as to how we can do this. For me, I think that we find out that in our countries, especially looking at Ghana, where I come from, most people grow food first of all, for their own, you know, they have small gardens and things that they grow for themselves to eat. And of course, they sell some as well. But if they did know about the improved crop varieties that are available or the biofortified crops and stuff, I'm sure that they would be able to grow them and consume them. So for me, I think that the first thing we may need to do would be to create awareness on the improved varieties that are available, improved crop varieties, those that are nutrient rich, that can be consumed and help meet some nutritional needs of the consumers. And again, Prof. Hetty mentioned that our indigenous crops, that's one of the big things. Again, for me, even in my home, for my children, it's usually, it has to be rice or it has to be bread. And you know, any other thing, you have to force them to actually eat it. And so for our indigenous crops now, if you go into the websites, you find out that indigenous crops covers a wide range. I have always wondered why we have something like cassava and yam in there, but those are there. We have the pulses, we have the legumes, they are there. So we have to now try and create awareness as to how these are very healthy and they need to be consumed by the general public. Another area that I think is we have to develop appropriate, culturally appropriate dietary modification strategies. For instance, we find out that we need to, in Ghana, for instance, if you came in and you're growing like say vegetables and you're growing cauliflower or those, usually those are for the markets, for the expatriate market, but not for the local consumers, because people don't like it. They have a quote in Ghana, they say, I am not a goat, in our local dialect, I'm not a goat that I should be eating grass, but if you have to bring those ones in, we have to bring those that will be acceptable to the consumer. So we look at vegetables that are acceptable and promote those. Of course, again, in Ghana, we are a fish eating country. We like a lot of fish. And so it's very easy to actually promote aquaculture than maybe promoting other means. We eat a lot of beans, we eat a lot of legumes. So we have to promote those ones. And it's easier for us to adapt that into our culture than just to go into something that we think is very common outside. Of course, for something like milk, in the southern part, milk is not very common. In the northern part, they do drink a lot of milk, but we drink a lot of processed milk, not fresh milk. So all these things, if we are trying to have promote healthy diets, we have to look at the culture and see what is acceptable for each region. Again, we think that, I think that there has to be some engagement between those who are producing the food or the agriculturists, the food processors, or even the nutritionists with the public, so that there'll be the food that will be generated or the food that will be promoted will be what the public would actually consume. It all comes down to the same area for me, that we have to focus our efforts into food that will be consumed. I think that the youth and the children are moving away and going into all these junk foods because they feel that that is the kind of taste they want. And so I think that we have to try and get our foods also in that area, not in terms of processing, but see how we can come up with foods that would also attract them and let them be able to consume them. And then the final thing I would want to say within the 10 minutes that I have is that we also have to increase the public knowledge about the importance of a regular consumption of different diets and the rich, nutrient-rich ones. I think Hester has also mentioned looking at the 3 countries and looking at what we consume. We need to know what is important. Again, in Ghana, for instance, it's very expensive buying fruits and buying vegetables. But if, say, you wanted to buy a can of Coke and some plantain chips, it's very cheap. You can afford that with less than $1, actually. But if you wanted to buy fruits, you probably get a small mango for almost $1. And that, of course, if you're looking at the average income of the Ghanaian, it's easier to buy those ones than to buy the nutrient-rich ones. But I think that if we are able to convince people about the importance of these and then the health implications, I think that we will be able to get people consuming more. Now, when it comes to improving the data for decision making, again, excuse me, I think that, I think that what we can do in that sense, also looking at a few key points that we can focus our attention on, would be to improve the current systems for collecting data. So we need the data. If there's no data, then we don't go anywhere. But we need the baseline data. We need to know what is also going on after the baseline data has been generated. We need to do constant collection of data. So we need to have strengthening that system that we have for collecting data, and that would also help in pushing that. We need to also increase the availability of ICT solutions. You know, in some places there's no internet, so there's no way of analyzing data. The capabilities are not there, you know, so we need to have all these in place to be able to ensure that we are able to collect the data and analyze them and be able to feed them into decisions that will be taken whatever level it is, whether it is the local government, the government itself, or whatever. We need to have increased the availability of these solutions. Again, I think that we need to strengthen the M&E skills and capabilities in nutrition at all levels. Again, I think that if we have the capabilities to be able to monitor what is going on, sometimes we don't even have the capabilities to monitor these things. And so we are not able to get the data that we need. Because you are looking at it today, whoever is trying to monitor is not actually skilled enough to monitor it and get us the data we need. So we need to strengthen the M&E skills there. And then we need to regularly update our instruments that we use for data collection. Some instruments have been, the last time, of course, I do a bit of post-harvest work as well. And for instance, for post-harvest data, we have used tools from forever. And it's now that people are now, institutions are coming up with new instruments and tools that we can use to assess post-harvest losses. So I think that we have to regularly update these ones so that they will capture what is happening at the particular moment. And finally, what I would say is that we have to, if we have all these in place, then we would ensure that leadership or management at all levels will use the data that is available to prioritize, to plan and track the performance and progresses of our nutrition situation in our various countries. So I will end here. I believe I see Prof. Kinabu, so I know my 10 minutes is almost up. So yes, this is where I would end. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gloria. You mentioned something very interesting, that people in Ghana say that they cannot eat grass because they are not what?
Goats.
They are not goats. But isn't it amazing that goats eat grass and make meat?
Yeah.
So it's high time we consider all those things. And thank you very much for that very exciting presentation. And with regard to data, I think it's a huge challenge. And partly, I think, is the financing of data generation in Africa is still very low. So we need to also consider that. So thank you very much, our two panelists. And now I would like to invite our participants to contribute in terms of questions or answers or comments or anything that you think can add value to what we have already listened to. So it's a session for question and answers. Welcome, participants. I wonder whether we have a question section somewhere where participants can. Kanto, have you received any questions from participants?
Madam Chair, I think people are posting it in the chat. If you look in the chat, I see that Rolf from Zambia made some comments, and I wonder if he wants to perhaps, also switch his camera on and ask. He made a comment, but at the same time, he also asked something. So I wonder if he wants to, to comment on that.
Yeah, I had actually requested him to say something about this. So, Rolf from Zambia, could you please?
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much. Interesting talk. A lot of the same problems that we're facing here. But, we've kind of gone in a different direction. Rather than biofortification, we're looking at natural fortification. And my partner, Seb Scott, has been doing this for 22 years now. Just growing crops without chemicals, without fertilizer, building the soil health up, building the soil biology so that the plants can really get all the nutrients they need, not just NPK, which we've kind of gone down to these days. And we do find that people really appreciate organic food these days in Zambia. You get a higher price for it because people do appreciate it. But on a sort of catchment scale, which I work in, try and help communities with this, we find that a lot of the problems are cultural. People, I don't know, I guess it's part of this colonization of everything, that people have moved away from the very diverse diets they had traditionally, which included, 200-300 forest products. There's 25 different mushrooms in the forests here. There's 25 or 30 different leaf plants that people collect. There's 50 different fruits, and most of these are not even cool anymore, so people don't eat them. And we find people just have narrowed down to eating maize meal and whatever small relish they can grow. And it's mostly tomatoes and onions now, which don't grow very well here. They get disease. The tuta eats all the tomatoes, and growing tomatoes in an environment like this is just very difficult. So it gets sprayed a lot, and the more you spray, the more biology you kill, and the less nutrient you have in your food. So this whole direction we find is much easier, just to get people to think about and to go back to their indigenous plants, which grow better, which are more resistant to pesticides, so you don't need to spray and kill the biology. And then also just take advantage of this forest. Part of the problem we see in the forest is the burning, right? So we've got a massive reduction in wildlife over the last 100 years, and a massive reduction in livestock. So now you've got this big biomass, and people have really started using fire much more than they used to. And the fire burns out a lot of that nutrient. A lot of the plants, the mushrooms and the stuff won't grow with after being burned too much. So it's all related to this management. But if we can go in that direction, we find that there's empowerment because you're using indigenous knowledge a lot. People don't need to be trained. You don't need to plant anything because it's just really to put animals back in there, get some manure going, get some hoof impact, and things start moving in the right direction. So I think it's a lot of the problem is a mindset. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you so much, Rolf. And I would like to probably ask you what policy issues are coming out from your observations that we could actually now be discussing. What should be the conversation actually in terms of policy in relation to what we've just said?
Joyce, the problem here has been a sort of tragedy of the commons, where a lot of the sense of ownership that was there under traditional management, under the chiefs and the traditional authorities, disappeared. And now people say Vaboma, it belongs to the government. So there's a bit of a careless attitude towards anything that's not actually yours. And so one of the policies that's really changing things is CBNRM. It's worked for 35 years. It's improved wildlife management for about 35 years now in Zambia and other countries in the region, of course. But we've seen it move quite recently into forestry. And this is really nice because we're seeing communities really being able to get back the sense of ownership of their forest, break it down into small areas, manageable areas, start defining what's in there, start really seeing what's in there, and building an economy around that. So it's really the management of that, which is important, and that requires a lot of investment of process, just to get everybody to start thinking again about what is really nutritious, what grows very easily, what abundance have you got which you're not taking advantage of, and how to get all that growing better with less fire and more animals. So
thank you. Thank you so much.
In fisheries as well. Thank you so much.
This is very insightful, actually. Thank you so much for your contribution. And I see your colleague is also adding point here about knowledge and knowledge systems. Yes, we have that's kind of indigenous knowledge that needs to be passed on to the current generation. That's very interesting. Any other questions? I don't see many questions in the chat box. Just comments. I see a comment from Mozambique that now they have vitamin A sweet potato and vitamin A maize that is slowly consumed and stimulated. So they have now shops that are selling these products. A request for presentations, Secretariat. I think there's still also observation from Ghana that vitamin A sweet potato and vitamin A maize need increased consumption and stimulation. I think this will get back to what Rolf has just said about, you know, leaving plants to grow naturally in the way they are. So, okay, are there any other questions? Yes, I see Ngoni Katibu. Hetty, would you like to go first before Ngoni? Professor Hetty.
Okay, actually, I just wanted to make a comment. I don't know if the Secretariat wants to take a photograph of the group as we did yesterday, and we can probably do that just before the next session. It's just a suggestion. And I think then let's go to Raboni's. Mine was just on matters of admin.
Okay, good. Thank you, Prof. And Ngoni, go ahead.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, so I felt like a bit compelled to comment a little bit on the knowledge systems, and it often seems that most of the time there is always a default setting or thinking to say we have to always go back to the indigenous, that becomes the mention. But in a way, it seems to me that on their own indigenous systems, they tend to be overpowered for many reasons, some of which are to do with the documentation thereof. And I think the conversation that I think is very important is the conversation around like what makes sense in terms of marriages of indigenous and scientific knowledge systems, in a sense, to kind of improve our food systems. I think that's a very imperative, but much more than that, I think it's also to do with who is driving the agenda of producing that particular knowledge in question. That's what I just wanted to say.
Thank you so much. It's very important, actually. We need also to observe those aspects so that we understand clearly how and what the conversation should be. Any other question or comment? I don't see any comments. So if that, okay, I see Simba. Prof. Simba, please.
Hi, thank you, Prof. Kinabo. Thanks to everyone. I'm actually at Nairobi Airport, just about to board a flight. But yeah, I think the issues here that we need to look at also is, you know, to do with, we really need to think outside the box. I mean, Africa is a very youthful population. And I like Gloria's presentation where she was talking about articulating demand issues. But there are some things we can't get back into the genie, so to speak. And we need to accept that our youth prefer foods that are convenient, easily packaged, and they can eat on the go. So how can we actually marry the traditional, you know, knowledge systems, traditional foods, and bring them to the 21st century in terms of convenience, in terms of packaging? Yes, we know that ultra processing is a problem, but do we have any innovations that would make these foods still remain nutritious, but packaged in a way that will appeal to our youth, but not only youth, but those that are working and have no time to prepare full meal. They want convenient food. So these are some of the issues we need to look at, especially from the scientific community, to see how do we meet this lifestyle. Thank you, and great session so far.
Thank you so much, Prof. Simba, and have a safe travel wherever you're going.
Thank you. I'm coming home.
Oh, welcome back. Okay, thank you so much for that observation. And I think when Dr. Gloria was presenting, and I was just wondering, okay, what happened? If we see children demanding those kinds of foods and not the indigenous traditional, then we must look for the culprit who actually caused this. Is it us as parents, or another generation before us, or who exactly? So I think here we need also to see who has actually contributed to this situation. Is it the multinationals or the generations before the current generations of children and youth who want easy to do foods? Beatrice, welcome. We have very few minutes remaining. Beatrice, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that. I would just like to say that when you look at it sometimes, and we say that we seem to be moving towards less indigenous foods. I think also as parents, the ones who are parents here, what kind of behavior are we mirroring to our children? Because these children, as they grow up, like emulating, culture is inculcated in them, including the culture of eating. So what are we showing the young children? So we have to go back to the drawing board, because sometimes I think maybe talking too much and saying, do this, but what we are showing them is different. What we are telling them, we are showing them is too loud that they can't hear what we are saying. So can we be able to show the right example to the children? So I think that is where, because these are the children who are going to be the youth of tomorrow. And also, just like the same point that Prof. Simba also put across, let's make this food cool. Indigenous and traditional, I mean that it has to be very, boring, because when it is boring, they will not go for it. Trust you me. So can we make it in ways that can appeal to them? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beatrice, for your contribution. And I think what you're saying is very clear, that we need to really diversify our food preparation methods. And this is something that has not picked up very significantly in this continent. If you look at Asia and India, Thailand, Philippines, they have a wide range of food processing methods. Same food can be prepared in very different ways and still tasty. So our culinary practices, I think, have to change and improve. If we are saying that we have to make this indigenous food sexy, and people demand for them increase. So I think this is something that we need to take on board as we discuss about training, education. The culinary practices are still not very diverse and improved to really take on board the 21st century demands. I go to Gloria and then Rolf, and then we close this session because we are really getting out of only 1 minute remaining. Gloria, please, Doctor.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. I just wanted to, as we were having this discussion, my mind just went to driving through Accra. And then I see all these huge signposts with all these junk foods advertised. And of course, if you're driving with your children, the first thing they see this food, they want it. So I'm just wondering, if we wanted to make our indigenous foods cool, or we wanted, then maybe we have to do more in terms of how we present it to the youth or the children. They need to be seeing, you know, it as the multinationals have put it out there. You know, KFC is out there, Burger King, and they all have these huge, you know, advertisements, billboards. So I'm thinking maybe we have to start thinking along those lines as well to see how we can get our children to find our indigenous foods cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gloria. And then Rob, please. And then we close this.
Just a quick point. I absolutely agree with that. We really need to be aware that, you know, multinationals are really trying to take over our food systems, from the seed to the fertilizer systems to anything they're trying to high input. The low hanging fruit for us, and we're working with various communities to try and stimulate and see how can we make stuff that's really cool on the market. And one of the things that we've seen is drinks. So you can make drinks. There's people here making drinks from baobab fruit and from tamarind, and they're presenting them in the same way as the Cokes and the Fantas. And that is catching on. And I think it'd be really nice if we just all said, let's buy local when we buy a drink, because every time we buy a Coke, the money's going to America. And so it's really an economic, social, and environmental decision. Drinks are a low-hanging fruit. There's plenty of stuff that we can make drinks from.
Excellent. I think that's great. So at least now we are seeing that we really have to make our local indigenous foods presentable, consumable. And in that way, we'll be able to stimulate demand. Otherwise, if we continue to say we're going to produce this, prepare these foods like our grandmothers used to, then we should forget about stimulating demand at all. Thank you so much to our panelists and our keynote presenter, Professor Hetty, for bringing out these very important aspects and very important issues that need to be taken on board when we discuss policy issues and interventions in Africa in terms of shifting to sustainable and healthier diets. Now, Professor Hetty had suggested about a group photo. I don't know, Kanto, is that possible now or we do it later?
Yes, I think you can have 5 seconds.
5 seconds for that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it, and then I invite the next presenters before we break.
All right, so everyone, please turn on your camera. We're just gonna have quickly a group photo and your smile. Oh, don't forget it, please. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, great attendance today. Last one. Thank you. Yeah, over to you, Prof.
Are we done? Okay, good. That's quick. Okay, let us now invite Ms. Betha Muntali and Dr. Beatrice Kiage, Dr. Beatrice Kiage. They're going to take us through all the initiatives that have been done by FANRPAN in terms of nutrition sensitive agriculture. Over to you, Betha and Dr. Beatrice.
Thank you, Prof. Kinabo. So my name is Betha, and I am a FANRPAN associate on nutrition within the Nutrition Sensitive Agriculture unit. And in this presentation, we will take you through what FANRPAN has doing in terms of nutrition sensitive agriculture. And I will present the first part where I'll look at the past and some of the continuing projects under nutrition sensitive agriculture FANRPAN. Then Beatrice will take you through the Zyron project, which is currently being implemented in Kenya. So, yeah. So we at FANRPAN, since we have nutrition sensitive agriculture and climate smart, on the nutrition sensitive agriculture, basically we are looking at nutrition sensitive agriculture in terms of food-based approaches to agriculture development. that puts nutritionally rich and dietary diversity at the heart of overcoming undernutrition. And we are also looking at how we can overcome overnutrition as well as micronutrient deficiencies. So basically, we are looking at the triple burden of malnutrition. The primary objective of investing in nutrition-sensitive agriculture and food system is to ensure that acceptable, diverse, nutritious, and safe foods adequate to meet the dietary needs of people of all ages are available and affordable at all times. This therefore can mean, for example, introducing good practices that enable year-round access to a variety of nutritious food, either by making sure producers have resources to produce the right foods, as well as healthy diets, also by making sure that the markets are responding and are able to pick on the nutritious foods. I think from the presentations that we have just had, we can see that providing nutritious food and making people access them, it's not going to be an easy thing, because we're not dealing with livestock where you can just come up with a diet portion and force them to eat, but we're dealing with humans who make conscious decisions. So it means also that we have to be very creative, as we said. Prof. Kinabo just said that we cannot expect to consume like our grandparents or ancestors did. Things are changing, diets are changing. There's a lot happening. Social media is influencing. We have influencers eating all sorts of things. Our young people are social media addicts. And therefore, it poses even increasing challenges in terms of how can we make our food nutrition sensitive. It's one thing to have food, but it's also another thing to have nutritious food. So I think the greatest challenge is how do we make available nutritious food? So nutrition sensitive agriculture, as we're looking at food production, we're also looking at income that can be used to purchase nutritious foods. We're also looking at empowerment of women as agents of change, because most of the times at a household level, you'll discover that most of the times it's the mothers who are around making decisions around food, but how do we empower them to make the right decisions? Because most of the times it's not only them making decisions on income use. We're also looking at reduction in real food prices associated with increased agriculture production. That's like a high level policy issue, where how do we influence policies at country level so that food prices are well regulated? As we heard earlier, there's a claim that healthier foods is expensive food, but it becomes expensive because cheaper food is so cheap and available, making those people who produce organic, healthier foods difficult to find or penetrate the market. So I think that's a policy issue. How do governments regulate or put bans and put regulations in place to say highly processed sugar sorted food will attract such penalties on the market? So those are the issues we're looking at. And then how do we make sure that nutrition sensitive is, agriculture growth is nutrition sensitive? We talk of green revolutions, about mega farms. Right now we're talking in Malawi about a lot of things that are happening in terms of producing to feed the growing population of Africa. But is our production climate smart? Is our production nutrition sensitive? So nutrition sensitive agriculture unit at FANRPAN not only looks at just the policies and advocacy, but we also do research actually on the ground. That's what Beatrice will also touch on, to see how do the things that we are proposing, the policies that we are advocating, if this happens, how do governments respond? How do they make contributions? How do they make decisions? Because there's a lot of political will, socioeconomic issues at hand. We're complaining about the giant food industries just putting a billboard in the middle of nowhere and advertising Coke. If you go to the field right now, if you're a field person like most of us, you will not find a bottle of water in the village, but you'll be sure to find a Coke or a Pepsi or something. So that's something that tells us that we, as we are pushing for nutrition sensitive production and consumption, we are also at war, a real war with the mega kind of corporates that are putting things out there in a global system. So the research we do and the recommendations and the experimentation, whatever is happening, we're trying to understand the food system and how our different players operate. Next, Kanto. All right. Okay, so in FANRPAN, so far we have implemented several projects. One of I think the major project that we just wrapped in a year or so was Atunu, Agriculture to Nutrition, which was done in collaboration with different consortium members and partners, including SUA University, including other organizations. So it was a consortium of different organizations across Africa. We're in Tanzania and Ethiopia. And actually the main point was really for us to answer the question of how can agriculture deliver positive nutrition outcomes. As I said earlier, producing food is one thing, but making sure it is nutrition sensitive and we are getting the right nutrients from the food is also another thing. And I think that's the greatest gap, that you find that people who are in food security policies would not sometimes understand why we push for nutrition to be part. So it shouldn't be food security. It should be food and nutrition security. So nutrition sensitive looks at things like that. National policies, frameworks that are designed, investments that government are putting. A lot of African governments right now are pushing for major food security implementation of activities and a lot of getting a lot of loans to produce. But the question is, are we being nutrition sensitive, but at the same time, are we being climate smart? So in our turn, we're actually looking at that, supporting governments to make their investments nutrition sensitive. We developed frameworks that could help. We have these frameworks on our website. When you go there, and if you want to implement a food and nutrition security project, you can actually use this framework to choose which interventions, activities you are going to go with so that you achieve your goals. And then we tested these nutrition sensitive activities, interventions in Tanzania and Ethiopia to generate evidence that we can use to engage government policies so that the right nutrition sensitive actions are taken in their planning. Another project we had or we still have is improving dietary and healthy data for decision-making in agriculture and nutrition actions in Africa. We were in Kenya and we used smartphone applications to collect and give feedback to caregivers on data. So we could take pictures of their food, the children health outlook, the homework that they're taking, and that data could go straight into the phones. We process it and the beneficiaries could access it back. So they could be able to understand in real time what is happening to their child, what is happening to their diets. We provide more up-to-date data for policymakers and food assistance programming. But it was also cheaper than conventional methods based on enumerator. So it was cheaper for farmers themselves to take charge of understanding their diets, understanding their children's nutritional status, than for us to recruit or to be financing healthy personnel to go into the fields to do work. It is very expensive for any government to do that. So this is one of the promising approaches on making data available in real time. Next. Yeah. So the other project that we supported was the SADC countries to develop food and nutrition security strategies. We worked in all SADC member states. This was SADC reaching out to institutions like FANRPAN to say, look, we really want our member states to align their food and nutrition security strategies to the SADC strategy. So we did this assignment. We assessed the alignment, how the countries were aligning to SADC. In addition to that, we developed guidelines on how each country can do. We identified gaps and how they can fill. It was a participatory and country-based assignment. We went to each and every country. Unfortunately, COVID came in, so some of the countries we had to do it virtually, but we were able to be in Malawi, to be in Zambia, and other countries that we were able to access. And we learned a lot of lessons from member states. We realized that countries have actually food and nutrition security strategies. Some just had difficulties with funding and financing those strategies. Some were smart enough to spread their strategy across many ministries within the country so that each ministry can take on the financial burden, which was a good learning curve for us to understand. So it's not only Ministry of Health and Agriculture that were responsible, but the sector itself ensures that even gender, even community development, water and sanitation, they had a part to play in ensuring that food and nutrition security is.
You have 2 minutes remaining.
Okay. The other projects, okay, so I'll just quickly go. Then we have the other support SADC countries to develop instrumental-based national agriculture investment plans. Then we also had a support to the COVID and capacity building for food security in Africa. I think I'll just allow Beatrice to give an example because I think we've been discussing on strategies. This is a practical example on the Xyron and on how we're making the food sexy for young people through beans products. So Dr. Beatrice, can you take over and just run it quickly through because we don't have much time.
Kanto, can you scroll through?
To Zyron. Yeah.
Yeah, to Zyron, yes. So this is the other project that is running in Kenya, and this is the Zyron, we call it the Zyron Pulse project. And here we are trying to upscale the adoption and the exploitation of a wide diversity of iron and zinc-rich beans. And this is in rural populations in Africa, and we're using Kenya as a case study. Kindly scroll through, Kanto. And then the aim of this project was actually just to gain knowledge that is related to micronutrient fortified bean innovations, and also to provide essential underpinning science, very important. And we had 5 objectives here that we're looking at. And first of all, we're doing the mapping of the candidate genes, then we're building on the gene characterization, and then we developed a toolkit. Then we applied this toolkit to enhance the dissemination, commercialization, and also utilization of this information on these biofortified bean varieties in Kenya. Then we also wanted to strengthen the human and physical capacities and linkages among the actors, especially in the bean value chain. The next slide, please. We had, this was a consortium that was composed of Aberdeen University, James Hutton Institute, FANRPAN, CalRO, and University of Nairobi. Next slide, please. So it was 5 members in this consortium, and we as FANRPAN undertook 5. We were tasked to undertake 5 activities, hold a dialogue with relevant stakeholders. Then what we design, we have designed a nutrition toolkit. Then we implement this toolkit. Then do the commercialization, you know, of these bean breeds that we came up with. And then to evaluate the performance of this toolkit. Then, of course, FANRPAN being very strong in policy, were to engage in policy dialogue and engagement. Next slide, please. So far, what we have done, we have developed the toolkit and tested it. Then also we have produced the various bean varieties jointly with the University of Nairobi and CalRO. Next slide. So just looking at what we have been told today about trying to make nutritious food more cool. First of all, we said by doing a formative research where we had a number of findings. And one of them, we found out that people didn't really understand the health benefits of food, of the beans fully. And they had misconceptions and myths on biofortified beans because they thought they were healthy. And from all the results that we got, we were able to come up with a nutrition resource kit so that we can be able to inform people on how, on the nutritional.
Could you mute your mic, please?
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So from the results we got from the findings of the formative research, then we came up with a nutrition toolkit to be able to educate the community and to be used actually by the extension workers when they go to the community to teach them about the nutritional benefits of beans, the health benefits of beans, because we realized there's a gap there. And we came up with leaflets and brochures with different information for different groups. As you can see here, we have information for farmers, with information for mothers and so forth. Then we are very important, we came up with recipes because we want to make beans more popular. How do you make them popular if you don't make them in a way that can appeal to even the young people and also to the children, for example, the mothers who are pregnant and lactating? So we had to make sure that we come up with recipes. Next slide, please. Because remember that these beans, this is just showing the way we had to grow the beans, breed them in the fields with the University of Nairobi, and then we had to engage stakeholders. Move on, kindly. Next slide. Kanto, next slide. Next slide, Kanto. So we had, these are the bean recipes that we came up with. You can see there we have cookies, we have bread, we have bean balls, all this. Next slide. We came up with really very interesting recipes. You can see that children, even the ones who don't like beans, can pick on this and go with it to school. And they would have taken these beans and they will still be able to get their micronutrient needs that they require. You can see all these products are from beans. Next slide, please. I'm moving very fast because I realize that we are really out of our time. And you can see that we had community demonstrations where we actually engaged the communities. We engage them to see how they can prepare various recipes with the beans. Let's move on, please. So you can see there, we are engaging with the community, and here we were with the team, just teaching them on how they can develop various recipes with the community. And what we actually learned from the community is that they were very excited that you don't only have to cook beans as stew or just the normal, like in Kenya, we say githeri, where you boil maize and beans, and then you just eat it like that. They were able to see that there are various ways you can be able to make beans more tastier. In fact, I remember that one of the homes where we carried out, this home you're seeing here, where we carried out the cooking demonstration, they said that, we are hoping that this is what you're going to be eating every day in this home, because people are tired of just eating boiled beans. So you can see that, one way of really making sure that you entice the population to eat this food, which is indigenous and also more nutritious, is by trying to make it cool. As you can see, the recipes, okay, we did very fast, we moved on very fast, but you can see, people eat bread. So if they can eat this bread, which is made out of beans, if they can make this many snacks out of beans, then we are going to promote the eating of these beans, which are very healthy. They have zinc and iron, which is very important for taking care of our stunting issues, and also the health benefits of beans, which we know very important for weight management and even for diabetes management and so forth. So thank you so much for listening to me. I know that we have really we have gone overboard, but thank you so much for this session.
Thank you so much, Beatrice and Betha. Yeah, what a coincidence, Beatrice and Betha, for taking us through this very exciting presentation about initiatives that are done by FANRPAN in association with other collaborators. And it's very exciting, actually, to see that beans can be made like bean balls.
Yes.
Very interesting. So this could be like school snacks, because we're facing a lot of challenge with snacks. The food environment around our schools filled with, there's all different junk foods. So this is something that you could actually sell to the Ministry of Education to see if they can now penetrate the food system within the schools. Right. So are there any burning questions before we break to our next session? If not, then I would ask Kanto to guide us as to how we break into these different groups. So we are going to hear about stakeholder voices, and we are going to go into groups for discussion. And we have discussion topics. We have 3 discussion topics. How can we make sustainable health that's affordable for all? And this will be led by Beatrice Kiage. And then we have another topic on how can we stimulate demand for nutritious foods. And this is going to be facilitated by Joao Mutundo from Eduardo Mondlane University. And then we have how can we improve dietary and health data for decision making. And the facilitator there is Nomatande Yek from NAMC. So over to you, Kanto, as I don't know how you have actually organized the groups so that people can go to their groups and start the discussion.
Thank you, Prof. Kinabo. So everyone, I'm going to open the room, so please join. If you don't have the invitation, please remain on the plenary session, because for French and Portuguese, we have a translation here. So please just join the room you are assigned to. Thank you. It's opening now. Please join.
Okay, participants, you can join the rooms depending on the topic that you want to make significant contribution to the discussion.
They are randomly shared, so based on the subscription. So yeah.
How do people join there? I think
They are joining already, Prof.
Yeah, I can see that.
But we don't know how to join.
No, actually, they have joined already, some of them. So if you don't have an invitation, please remain on the room. So this room will be facilitated by Prof. Joao Mutundo on how can we stimulate demand for nutritious food.
Okay, I get you. I thought I was lost. So I remain in the room and
yes,
participate in this, how we stimulate demand. Okay, thanks.
Yes,
so
thank you.
Prof,
Me as well, Bertha. Yeah.
okay, Prof. Joao, you can take over to facilitate. We have French and Portuguese speakers as well in-house. Thank you, Prof. Over to you.
Thank you, Kano. I appreciate the opportunity to facilitate this group on how to stimulate demand for nutritious food. So you are telling me that you have a translation Portuguese to English as well as French to English. Does it mean that can I speak in Portuguese?
Actually in English, Prof, and they will listen to Portuguese and French.
Okay, so you are requiring me to still speaking in English. Okay, thank you. Well, colleagues, welcome all of you in this group that we are going to discuss about how to stimulate the demand for nutritious food. My name is Joao Mutondo. I'll serve as moderator of the group. Myself, I work at the Eduardo Mondlane University here in Maputo, Mozambique. I'm a FANRPAN node coordinator for Mozambique. So I've been with the FANRPAN family since then, since the establishment of the network. How we're going to proceed. You know, all of you, the topic that we're going to discuss. We heard from the previous speakers about the challenges that we have for having access to nutritious food. We had a chance to see some statistics regarding the malnutrition and the budget necessary for purchasing nutritious food. As we know, there's a challenge for ordinary African citizens to have access to nutritious food. And that is because the incomes of the majority of African population is low, and therefore affordability is limited. I think we all also know that actually almost 100% of the majority of African population use the income for food, and even that income is not enough to purchase food for guaranteeing food nutrition and security. Majority of Africans are price sensitive, meaning that we decide what we buy, taking into account the price of the commodity that is in our hand. So there can be a good commodity, good nutritious food, but if it is expensive, it is more likely to not be chosen to be bought because of the price. So those are the issues that we have: price sensitivity, and we also have a problem of not having availability of enough quantities of nutritious food because of our production technologies and the other issues regarding production. And that makes it to have nutritious food more expensive compared to other foods that are there available. So those are the issues that we have to debate, and as a stakeholder contributes, how can we change this scenario in order to have the majority of Africans demanding more and nutritious food. Having said that, I hope that all of you can understand my English. I'm a Portuguese speaker. I will put the discussion on the floor, and if you want to say something, you can raise your hand. I'll give you the opportunity to contribute, and I can serve as a reporter so that I can also go to the plenary to report about what we discussed here in this group. Please, let's discuss about how to stimulate demand for nutritious foods in our setting, in African settings. Thank you.
Prof. João, I think a question that I would like to ask the team here is if there's anyone who can respond on what measures should be put in place to ensure that consumers' demand for nutritious food, that consumer demand for nutritious food from suppliers. I'm not sure if anyone can answer that.
Can you repeat the question, please? Can you repeat the question?
All right. What measures should be put in place to ensure that consumers' demand for nutritious food from suppliers?
I think I can attempt to come in on that one.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think the relationship between the consumer and the producer or the supplier is a two-way. You produce, I eat it. I demand, you produce it. It's a two-way thing. Sometimes I'll demand something, and as a producer, you were not aware of that demand. But the more you see it being demanded, you might start to respond to that demand of the consumer. At the same time, you could be producing as someone who is a producer, and you see that people are still responding to that. The two-way relationship sometimes can go without checks and balances if we do not engage the middle bodies or institutions, which in this case, we're looking at the government itself. I think if government do not have like strict policies in place, the two players on both ends might end up not giving each other what they are looking for. So for example, I'll give you an example. A consumer can demand that, oh, we need burgers, we need this, we need that. The supplier will supply that. But now the government in between might be facing the consequences of the demand that the people were demanding. Yes, they're free economy, they're free people, they can demand anything. But by the end of the day, the government, the institutions in place should be put in a way that they regulate the relationship. I was involved in developing food-based guidelines for Botswana, and there was a lot of talk between the government itself to say that, look, we have allowed a free market in terms of food access, but by the end of the day, our healthy system is overwhelmed because we are seeing increases in opportunistic diseases, diet-related diseases, and a lot of burden in management of nutrition related. How do we come up with a way of managing this? So the government, through different technical working groups, through different ministries and partners, they come up with national guidelines, which would guide citizens on what is available and what they can consume. So it's like they nudge the population towards healthier options. Yes, they allow them to go get what they want, but at the same time, they put out cautionary messages to say, if you eat things like this in excess, this is what you get. So I think consumer knowledge influencing the food choice is not left to chance and market. It's something that a game a government should play. Just like these multinationals are able to sell you Coke. You know, they make Coke like something that you can't do without if you are eating chicken and chips. You know, you see those adverts and you're like, oh yeah, I need the Coke. The same with governments, I think. When people are out there trying to, it's like a jungle, it's so wild, you know, you need to protect your citizens. So give them information, not that you are preventing them, but they are aware that there are consequences of consuming certain foods, levels of salt, levels of alcohol. So the food-based dietary guidelines put caps on that, how much alcohol can be made available to which group. If you're pregnant, you have your specific diets. I know a lot of countries, Tanzania was the first, I think, to do this. Zambia has done this. South Africa already has food-based dietary guidelines. I'm not very sure if they have updated them, but a lot of countries put in place things that can regulate the relationship between the consumer and the producer. You can't leave that to chance. Otherwise, the burden will fall back on you as a government, now managing the consequences of a free market diet. I think that's my contribution. I don't know if I'm making sense, but that's how I look at it.
All right. Thank you, Bertha. I think, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that contribution. I think if I want to summarize on it, we have to have institutions which can make the relationship between the suppliers and the demanders working, the consumers. And those institutions can be policies and organizations which can give information about the quantity and the quality of the food. So that is a very, very wonderful approach. And they gave some example of countries that are doing that for promoting the demand for nutritious food. Thank you. Please, let's, if there's someone else who would like to comment on this question for country.
We have David and Martin and Tapil. I think they raised their hands.
Okay, thank you very
I
much.
see them, but David, go ahead.
Hello? Hello?
Please.
We can
Hello.
hear you.
Yes, we can
the
hear
floor
you.
is yours.
Yes, I was saying that is quite good. I agree with the previous presenter, but some of the problems we currently have in our countries is that the consumer is not very aware of his or her own rights. So even if they are specified on the label, we hardly go out there to check what exactly is supposed to be done. So that's the major issue which also to be done, consumer awareness. Thank you.
We have another.
Hello. I think I can also just add a little bit on that. He's very right on consumer awareness. I think the level of knowledge given to consumers is very low. I have come across people who are asking to say, should expiry dates really be taken into consideration? What do they mean? Or when this label says kilocalories is like this, how can I trust this? So you see, sometimes people go out looking for information on their own because they have not been equipped with the right information, the knowledge that they're supposed to get. I think we have a lot of outlets to inform the consumers. We have schools, all of them. We have our children who are always on the phone playing all sorts of games which we don't even understand. But yet we do not have like African initiatives where we can make available games, to nutrition games to children where they can understand food choices, or even in their curriculum, things that are exciting of the age. Because what we have noted is teaching children things like nutrition in class and examining it. They consider that as an examination. You see, but if you take and package the information that you want, I think it would all depend on the creativity and innovation of different governments and institutions to say, how do we capture the population group that we want? We know that 10-year-olds, 15-year-olds, in 10 years' time, they'll be 25, they'll be parents, they'll be mothers. If we leave to chance the information without controlling and giving them nudges and pointers, like signposts, they will be like free to do anything. So he's very right. Access to information sometimes should not be just left to chance. People need the right information. I think it should be a human right to get the right information on food and diet. It should be something that the government takes as their own responsibility to make sure that as many people understand the food systems, the players at stake, and all the things that are happening. And the citizens should be able to demand and question these producers to say, no, according to government policy, it says ABCD. Why are you doing ABCD? Maybe why is this not iodized? Why there's no vitamin A when government policy says ABCD? So I think that relationship should be very intimate between the producer, the consumer, and the knowledge people in between. So I really like the comment on the knowledge gap that he lays. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next.
Oh,
Please, Martin.
Yeah, are you getting me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah. My comment is on the area discussed the issues of indigenous local foodstuffs. We have a lot of nutritious indigenous foodstuffs in our countries in Africa here. What is lacking is sensitization. We need to have probably a Minister of Agriculture or whichever government in the wings need to sensitize our people on what type of foodstuffs we have, which are nutritious, and add value to our bodies. And we also need to do documentation of this indigenous food. A lot of people don't know them. The indigenous foods, for instance, in Zambia here, which are eaten in Western Province, they could be not known in another province, Northern Province or Northwestern Province. They are not known. So if there's documentation, then people will know that these foodstuffs which are found here, they're also equally found here, they can be eaten. And not only that, we need also preparation recipes, which should be written in local languages. Some of these indigenous foods we have, people don't know how to prepare them. Other tribes in other localities, they know well how to prepare them, but other places, they would not be in position to know how to prepare them. So if there could be some documentation of how these nutritious foodstuffs are prepared and recipes made in local languages, then our people would probably be positioned to utilize this foodstuff. That's what I thought I should add up. Thank you.
Kanto, I can just give more information to the Zambia comment. I think the government of Zambia and Tanzania have done a lot more advancements compared to other member states in terms of packaging the local foods, how they can be cooked, the nutritional content. But I think the challenge has been on how to take that information widely out. I've come across documents from Ministry of Agriculture and Health in Zambia where there are different foods. Of course, especially the concentration has been on under 5 children diet, I should say just children, but there are also a lot of foods within those recipes and the documentations that point to different foods from different Zambian provinces, how they are cooked, how they are consumed, and things like that. And I think it will just be a need to take it upon with the ministries responsible to start making that information available, because we notice that sometimes those documents are at National Food Commission just sitting, or maybe in a particular ministry without the general population getting to get that information. So I think I would like to link up with the Zambia team and just see how best we can engage the ministries to have that information available to as many people as possible. So Zambia, I'm open to that for further discussion.
Hi, João. Simba, yeah.
Please go ahead, Simba.
Yeah, I just wanted to address the issue of awareness, which we seem to be grappling with. Now, if you look at the playbook of nationals, your, big corporations, who sell us food that we seem to think is causing problems, the marketing is very aggressive. And so we need to see whether we can do a similar thing for nutritious foods, but this will have to be a public good. We'll need governments to actually fund this, just like we did with the social marketing when we had a challenge with HIV, and recently we've had a challenge with COVID. I think the challenge we're facing, especially from NCDs, which are caused by bad nutrition, is equally dire. So I would like to see public funds going into, social marketing, promoting nutritious foods as, something good for you. And just the same way that, the companies are advertising food that we know is not good for the population. So that's one thing. The other thing, of course, is I saw a comment on the chat that was saying, look, it's all about prices. It's not that people don't know that what is good, but at the end of the day is whether you can afford it. And I think the presentation this morning, which was showing the affordability of different food baskets, is evidence that it's expensive to eat well, to eat proper. So maybe this is where government also can step in and put in some instruments, maybe temporary sort of subsidies, and once people are used to the fact that this is good food, they probably would continue to buy that even if the subsidies go afterwards. There's evidence to this kind of thing. I remember in a conference in one of the Scandinavian countries, they were trying to promote consumption of fruit and veggies, and government subsidized for a while. And when and of course, consumption went up. And when they stopped the subsidy, people were already had internalized the consumption of these good foods that they continued to buy. The demand did not go down to the before intervention time, so it remained fairly high. So these are some of the innovations that I think we can push for and see if this could be popularized through some policy instruments. Thank you.
Thank you, Simba. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, colleagues.
Good afternoon. Go ahead, please.
Okay. I think maybe participation of small-scale farmers I think it becomes very important in terms of providing the healthy basket, and that I believe by promotion of competition with the multinationals, we'll be able to come and reduce the pricing. If I think we have to look at it from ground. Are the small scale farmers able to purchase the seed, the fertilizer at the same pricing that the multinationals are able to purchase it by? If it's not, then I think it's important to put a regulation that kind of forces or that kind of break down the price discrimination between small, medium enterprises, the historical disadvantaged individuals, in order to be able to be competitive in the market, because you cannot expect the small scale farmers to be competitive in the market, whereas they're not receiving the same pricing in terms of the commodities that they buy, the fertilizer, the seeds, and the way that they participate in the market. I think that becomes very important in how things are done at the ground level. And I think bringing down a regulation that is able to control that environment, to be able to be to inclusive to all the players, that it becomes very important.
Thank you, Boy.
We have
Please.
in hand.
Yes, go ahead, Kanto.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. I'm hearing quite like confusing or conflicting remarks about affordability of nutritious diets. If we start from that footing, I think it will be very difficult to get this message across to consumers. Starting by saying, okay, nutritious foods are expensive. We need to be very careful here to see who is actually affected by the price, because we have different sectors in the economy, and obviously the low level of income population is the one that is affected more. But then the idea of coming up with this like we are trying to block demand for nutritious foods by saying that these foods are expensive. I think we need to use probably different language. I know price matters, actually, food price matters, but then I don't know, I'm feeling like we are taking a very different approach in trying to stimulate demand. If we are talking of stimulating demand, let's think of ways to make these foods even more cheaper, but not saying that the nutritious foods are expensive. I just wanted to make that observation so that we don't go out of this meeting saying that, okay, yes, we know they're expensive, but let's find a way of presenting that information to consumers so that at the end of the day, we are not like blocked for nutritious food.
Thank you, Joyce. Understood. We can't just remain on the affordability, but we have to look at the mechanism to have nutritious food affordable to all. Please, let's contribute. Kano, do you have another question that you can provoke us? Hello, is there someone who wants to speak on how to stimulate demand for nutritious food? Go ahead, Magic.
I say maybe I can add a bit my 2 cents from the South African perspective. Look, the government has developed nice policies, which to me are out there, but the implementation on the ground really is really minimal, because you see it on paper, but there is not much emphasis even from the budget and all, you know, the support services, be it extension work, be it research, be it everything. There's very little that is channeled towards indigenous food production, and I would say even participatory indigenous research related, you know, work. So I feel Africa needs to push and learn from real countries that have adopted indigenous knowledge system, like when we look at your India, the Philippines, and all of those who really ensured that whatever that is documented is also, you know, implemented on the ground. Because you look at even the extension services, there's still a strong stigma and perception when it comes to indigenous knowledge systems. You go on the ground, there is not even quantification of farmers that are into indigenous farming systems, or those that produce the indigenous food crops. So I still, a lot still needs to be done in terms of the side of awareness, and also maybe including youth. That's my take. Thanks.
Thank you, Magic. Thank you very much.
Just a small contribution on our theme, on our topic actually, how to stimulate demand for nutritious foods. I think we have heard presentations from our presenters. Something that has not come out very clearly is how do we use the school environment actually to stimulate demand for these nutritious foods. We know that in boarding schools or even day schools, school children are given food. How can we modify meals and new patterns in our schools to ensure that these nutritious foods are included in their diet or in their meals? First of all, I think for some schools, they can produce their own vegetables and fruits if they have an orchard or a garden of some sort. And for schools can also be a good market for small scale producers, where they can go and sell their vegetables to the schools. So I think if we start with our young children in schools and also in primary and secondary school, we could actually achieve something in terms of stimulating demand for some of these foods. I remember when we went to school then, there was foods that we had never tested in our households, but we tested them when we were in school. So from there on, we actually developed that sense of taste for the kind of foods that we consumed in school. So I think that one can also be something to take on board. How do we use the school environment to actually stimulate demand for nutritious foods? Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you,
Hi,
Joyce.
João.
Yes. I
Yeah,
would like
just about
yes, I'll give you now I would like to inform the participants who had the first question, but no Canto sent 3 questions. We have the second one. How can we give a voice to marginalized groups to influence supply of nutritious food? So I will give Simba to add what you want to add, and then we think about other questions that we have. Even we can go back to the first question. Thank you.
Yeah,
Simba,
that
go
was
ahead.
that was the question I wanted to pose, because yes, we are talking demand, but from my experience, even when you are in the know, in other words, you have got potential demand, but eventually your demand is not met, so you kind of end up not bothering. Like, for instance, you are looking for traditional foods, which we know to be nutritious, and which actually have become very elitist, because those people that have high income, they know that these foods are good for them. But if you go to a supermarket, you're not going to find this food. So really, I'm thinking this question is talking about activism, so to speak, where we actually have consumer groups demanding, even the multi-corporations, multinational corporations, demand that they make more nutritious food, improve their offering. We've seen some of this happening with outlets like your fast foods, now trying to make some foods with a bit of green in them, your burgers with a bit of salad. That is actually responding to pressures, but they are basically washing this, the term, washing, like in gender washing, where you just make a statement here and there, but you're not really changing fundamentally. But this change can only happen if the consumers, especially the marginalized groups, have a greater say in the food system, the food environment, the kind of thing. We can't just sit there like, sitting ducks and wait for the ultra processed foods to take us out. We really need to go out there and tell these corporations we don't want this, or if anything, maybe somebody should mobilize and really go into civil disobedience and just boycott some of these products. Thank you.
Thank you, Simba. We're now under the question number 2. How can we give voice to marginalized groups to influence supply of nutritious food? Let's go to contribute, colleagues. How can we give a voice to marginalized groups to influence supply of nutritious food?
Chair, could you type that question on the box?
Yeah, the question already typed by Canto. If you go to the messages, I think it's one of the first messages. No, it's not the first, but there's a message written by Canto. Canto.
I sent it to you, Prof. Only. Sorry.
Ah, you sent to me only. Okay, then I will type. I will type to everyone. Thank you. I'll type to everyone the 3 questions. I thought that everyone received. I'll type the question to everyone now.
In the meantime, I think Prof. Hetty is raising her hand. Yes, Prof.
Yes, so perhaps not really speaking to this question, but just to reiterate what Magic said about policies in South Africa, that we have very well developed policies, but it's not implemented. And a very good example is that we have a few food and nutrition security policy for South Africa that was developed 5 years ago, with the 5 main departments that are involved in food production and Department of Health, the Department of Basic Education. Everyone was involved, and it's a fantastic policy, but it's never been funded. So it's rolled out in little bits and pieces, but it has not been funded to the level that we can actually implement it and that we can actually measure the outcomes. Although the M&E is part of the policy, but because it is not mainstream funded by government, it's only bits and pieces are implemented. And then what Joyce said, which is the low-hanging fruit, is how do we actually educate school children on how to promote nutritious food? And I think that is in South Africa, we do have a school feeding program, and the school feeding program goes to the lower income schools. And though we did a study on the acceptability of the foods, and we found that, well, one of the things that we found when we looked at nutrient intake or protein intake, and I did it with Dr. Hester Vermeulen as part of the PhD, we picked up that people were eating a lot more tinned fish than they used to do 15 years ago. And the only reason why we thought we measured that is because the children get tinned fish as part of their school meals. And because they learned to accept it and they learned to actually like it, they continued to buy it when they were adults. And so I really think, that a good entry point is at the school, at the primary school level.
Thank you for bringing this issue of giving awareness to the kids at the school, how to educate the school children on this nutritious food. Let's continue. I send the questions to everyone now, the 3 questions, so you can see them and they contribute. Thank you. We can see from Rolf from Zambia here, the discrimination on the subsidies of nutritious food. So more money is given for exotic grains and 0 for subsidies for health foods. Then this is a scenario that we need to change in Africa if we want to promote nutritious food and guarantee health society in our countries. So let's go to comment. How can we then change this scenario of giving subsidies for exotic grains rather than health foods? Over to you.
Hello. Okay, so I think what we have noted over the years is that especially in Southern Africa, many governments have taken, let's say, for example, maize as a political crop, whereby because people rely so much on the consumption of maize, if the people do not have it, it's as good as the government that is in charge at that time has failed them. So they will do anything to finance production, monocropping of the maize, just that in the next elections, they can get a vote. Even if we have put across in documents, strategies, policy advocacies about how undiversified that approach is, we increasingly see that the maize still has a priority. I know, for example, like now in Zambia, the maize, they have added a few more of the, I think, of the crops that the farmers can access on the subsidy, but still maize dominates. Even in Malawi, maize dominates a lot. There was an attempt to include legumes like soya, groundnuts, beans, but still maize dominates. But apart from that, the maize itself, we talk about the real original African crops that we had in those days, like Malawi, Zambia. I know maize was not the staple in those days. We had millet, we had sorghum, but because of 100 years of growing maize, our generation don't even appreciate the consumption of grains like sorghum and the millet. We don't even know how to prepare it. Of course, I've seen now increasingly in a Zambian, if you go to a local Zambian restaurant like Mateweto here in Zambia, you still get something with the maize mixed with millet or cassava mixed.
Sorry, time is not on our hands now. If you can summarize so that I can also summarize here and close the.
Okay, so my example was just to emphasize that even ourselves, the consumers, the access of the staples itself makes, or the grains, makes the government align to what we demand more. So I think it's the onus is also on us to say, are we willing to diversify beyond the maize? So I think that's the only way to regulate the maize business in some of these SADC countries.
All right, everyone. Everyone is coming back to the plenary, so I think it's time to wrap up, to end actually.
Okay, so I'll summarize, and any group member can add the plenary. Huh? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Prof. Joyce, over to you.
Thank you very much, and welcome back, our participants from the various groups. And I think it's time for plenary session, and we're gonna hear from the groups as to what they deliberated on. If I may invite now the group that was dealing with topic number 1. This was facilitated by Dr. Beatrice Kiage to make their presentation. Beatrice, over to you.
Good afternoon. Is Rachel here? Okay, she's not there. I will summarize what we had in the group, and the other group members, you are free to just give additions where you feel that we have not captured everything. And our question, we're looking at how we can make sustainable, healthy diet affordable for all. And we started by looking at the approaches and innovations that we can promote to make nutritious foods affordable, especially for vulnerable groups. And group members felt like we could actually make sure that we come up with, smart foods, okay, so that we can be able to make sure that people are enticed to eat these foods. And then we also thought about kitchen gardening, okay, so that, if you find a place where you can't find a farm to farm, you can come up with kitchen gardenings. And then we also thought about having, innovations on taxations, so that foods which are unhealthy are highly taxed, so that people can be encouraged to go for more healthier foods. Then we also looked at some of the policy issues that can also be put in place, whereby we thought that the government could come up with policy issues to be able to help farmers, for example, on input, so they're affordable and more available. And this can only happen at the government level. Then we also looked at the, some of the, what role the farmers have in this. And group members thought that the role that and the responsibilities as farmers have in terms of making sure that our diets are more healthy and more affordable is usually underestimated. And group members felt that farmers really contain a rich repository of knowledge that we could tap into to ensure that we have a supply of this healthy and nutritious food, which is more sustainable all year round. Then we also, felt that also they are a hub of experimentation in terms of practice, because they've been doing this from time to time, so they know what works and what doesn't work. So if we could tap into this, then we thought that that this could help in making sure that our foods are more healthy, more affordable and sustainable. Then even mapping out of the farmers who are carrying out this, who are growing, doing organic farming. We felt that this is not being done and this should happen. And then also, we thought that some of these farmers could be champions, in promoting these foods. And then also, we thought that also the government could come in, and this also tied in so much to the issue of policy, that it should come in and make sure that, yes, the farmers are producing these foods which are more healthy in a more sustainable manner, but is there a market for this food? Because you want to make sure, yes, you want to make sure the food is more sustainable, but do you have market for it? Then also there's training that is needed, because sometimes the farmers don't have the skills that they require to grow this food. And then also there should be investment in terms from the government, to make sure that they invest in the farmers to be able to grow this food. And then also to make sure that the environment is right for the farmers to make profit. This is also tied down very closely to what the government is supposed to do. Then to make sure that this environment is enabling and the farmers can be able to thrive. Then also regulate the private sector, because sometimes we thought that the private sector comes in and they really thwart the efforts of the farmers in growing these healthy and sustainable foods. Because, well, think about the multinational companies that come in and they have so much money to advertise for their foods, which our farmers don't have. Then also, we also thought about the issue of what the private sector also and the food industry can do, and also even the government. And we also thought about the issues of post-harvest losses. This makes food unavailable to the others because there's so much losses that are happening at the farm level, actually throughout the value chain. So if this could be handled at the value chain, then we would have more sustainable and healthy diets. Then also enforcing legislation by the government, very important. And then responsible advertisement, because we thought about what happens in like substances like cigarettes and beer, which does not happen in foods. And we're giving examples of these multinational companies, which are in the developed countries. And we're giving an example of like the US, whereby when you take a menu and you look at this food you're going to eat, you're able to kind of tell how much calories, how much protein, fat you're going to get from this. The same companies are here in the third world countries, and they don't give that information. So they have to be more responsible. Then also there should be the issue of initiatives in research, meaning that we have to really work with universities and research organizations to make sure that we are able, because you see, when there is research showing, for example, the impact of this healthy food vis-a-vis this unhealthy food, then of course this is going to encourage people to be able to grow this. So I don't know whether there's something else I have left out. My group members can be able to add. I just summarize because I can see we don't have a lot of time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Kiage. And now I invite facilitator of topic number 2, Joao Mutundo, to make a presentation. Joao?
Well, yes, Josia, thank you very much for the opportunity. So our group, we're discussing how to stimulate the demand for nutritious food. And myself, I will summarize the measures that we're discussing there. We listed, which we think that can stimulate demand for nutritious food. It is true that we had like 3 questions there, starting how can we give, what measures should be put in place to ensure that consumer demand for nutritious food from suppliers, and then another question, how can we give voice to marginalized groups to influence supply of nutritious food, and then finally, what policy measures should be put in place to promote demand for nutritious food. So what I'm going to mention now is kind of answers to those 3 questions. We agreed in the group that we have to establish and operationalize institutions. We're talking about policy organizations which can provide enabling environment for improving demand for nutritious food. So policies are very important. The second issue that we think that should
Joao, is it just me?
I think it's on my side too.
Yeah, he's jumped.
Yeah. Maybe Joao, you want to switch off your video?
We lost him.
I think while he's sorting out the issue. Oh, he's back.
Hello.
Okay.
Yes, Joao, please switch off your video. Your connection
video
is not very good. Yeah,
okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah. The second point was awareness of the consumers. The third point is sensitization of indigenous food. So the sensitization here should also include documentation of the different indigenous food that is there. So people actually they have quite a good varieties of indigenous food that is a nutritious food, but they don't have a knowledge of that food. So we think that documenting those indigenous food can be a good measure for people to get know and they use it for consuming. This process of awareness, sensitization, we have to try to cover the majority of the consumers. So wide dissemination
information on the nutritious food is needed. Also, we agreed that the price is a problem. A lot of people cannot afford to purchase the nutritious food, but we also agreed that we can't just be in that position of saying that the price is high, so we do nothing. But taking into account that the price is another issue that we have to deal with, we agreed that the temporary subsidies for nutritious food can be a good measure, in the sense that when people now are used to demand nutritious food, even when that subsidy is removed, then they may continue demanding nutritious food. And there are some experience of several countries that they did the same and they improved the demand for nutritious food. Price discrimination is another measure that we came up with, and mainly for small and big enterprises, because they have different access to inputs and so on. So that can also be a mechanism for increasing the demand for nutritious food. We also agreed some policies are there. We have policies for improving demand for nutritious food, but those policies are not well implemented. So there's a need of improving the implementation of the existing policies, and we can take the lessons from countries which did the same and did well, and have it as an experience for us, and apply for improving the implementations of the policies that we have towards increasing the demand for nutritious foods. Around the policies, we also agree that a lot of policies for improving demand for nutritious foods are not well funded, or even not funded at all. So there's a need of improving the funding of the existing policy if we want to change the scenario for improving the demand of nutritious food. We came up to also the school, if we can sensitize our children at the school, will be a key for the continuation of the demand of the nutritious food, even for the increasing the demand also. So the measure here was to introduce nutritious food at the school curriculums, which can be a powerful tool for the increase in the demand of the nutritious food. So this is what I was able to catch and summarize from the discussion that we had in the group. We have group members here. I would like to call them to add what I have missed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joao. I think we'll leave that for some few minutes. Let's hear from facilitator of topic number 3, Nomatande, and later on we'll have like a discussion around those topics for some few minutes before we close. Nomatande, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good day to all the colleagues on the platform. My name is Namantande Yeki, and I'll be reporting for Group 3. And we were looking at how can we improve dietary and health data for decision making. So question 1 was, what type of data do we need to inform policies on food and nutrition security? We then said, as the group, soil nutrition, to understand soil nutrition is very important. Therefore, we need to collect data on that so that we know which crops to diversify to based on the demand as well. And then we need to go back, as another point was that we need to go back to indigenous food and see if also there's a demand for these types of food. And also another thing that we identify is that there's a complex problem that is affecting our food systems, which is there's no data on food waste, post-harvest losses, climate change information, therefore we need such data. And also we need to see if we can collect data on promotion on locally produced food, perhaps even providing subsidy to locally produced food. And also we need to collect data in terms of understanding the influence of multinationals in our food systems. What is the influence that they have? Do we shift more towards their produced foods or locally produced foods? And also there's a need to collect data on agro-processing for food preservation. And also moving to the second question, who should supply this data? So we said two important suppliers of data was primary data, which are the normal citizens, and also secondary data, which are your research institutions, your Department of Agriculture and higher learning institutions, and in the case of South Africa, bodies like Statistics of South Africa. And what, moving to the third questions, what technological innovation can we use to improve supply of nutrition and health data for decision making? We highlighted, and I think it was emphasized throughout the presentations, that mobile based platforms can be a good way to improve the supply of this data. And also the second one that we indicated is geolocation data to understand specific data based on location. And also the last one is what institutional measures and systems should be in place to ensure availability of necessary data. We said government is the key role player in this. And also we then highlighted that currently the main funding for this type of interventions is coming from the North. And therefore, if it's coming from the North, they will fund research that is serving their interests first. And also, therefore, we need as Africa to prioritize funding of such so that we can find, we need to prioritize funding of such interventions. I don't know if I've left anything. The colleagues in my group can come in. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nomantande Ayeki, for that presentation. And now I'd like to call upon all participants from all groups to just mention some of the aspects or issues that have not been presented by our facilitators. Yes, Ulungowe, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to make some comments in terms of the, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, in terms of the crops, for example, I'm looking at maize and some of these other crops like sorghum and millets. I think some of the issues that we have are in terms of productivity per unit area. If you look at a farmer growing maize, they can hit 10 tons. But if you look at a farmer growing pearl millet, the tonnage they can get from that same 1 hectare is something like maybe maximum 2 tons. But then the price difference between the maize and the millet is very little. So the farmer would actually prefer to grow maize because they'll actually get more money ultimately. So this productivity, in terms of our farmers have very small pieces of land. So if I have a very small piece of land, if I grow, I've got 1 hectare, I grow maize, I get 10 tons, I'm going to get more money. If I grow 1 hectare of pearl millet, I'll actually get less money. So we need to look at how then do we raise the profitability of these marginal crops. For me, what is critical is, can we push the farmers maybe up the value chain? If the farmer is growing such a crop, maybe if we can capacitate the farmer to add value so that it's not sold as the raw produce. So we need to look at the profitability of the different crops. And in terms of that, the farmers have sometimes very little land available. So this is one point I wanted to make. And also I wanted to look at, in terms of nutrition, we talked a lot about
brief
production.
So that others could also contribute.
Okay, just shortly, in terms of the consumption itself, in terms of how are we presenting some of these nutritious foods. Traditionally, I'm from Zimbabwe, Zambia. a lot of the nutritious food is prepared in a very boring kind of manner. I mean, if you look at the young children. So can you also maybe bring in creativity in collaboration with the private sector to present some of those foods in an attractive way to entice maybe young people to also consume those foods? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lungowe. And looking at the profitability, it will defeat the whole purpose of making these things nutritious. So let's see how that will be picked up by others. Simba, are you trying to add points or subtract?
Not really add or subtract, but the last comment seemed to be putting the risk on the farmer who is already carrying a heavy burden. I would like to suggest that this is a policy issue. If governments think that nutritious foods are important, and indeed they are, we know that, then they should be prepared to help farmers to up the price. If this is a good product, why not create policies that to make sure that farmers get reasonable gain so they can produce what we want? So obviously governments have got the tools to be able to do this. So it's a policy thing that I would suggest that governments would look at to try and make sure farmers are being paid a reasonable price. If they look at the money they spend on health to manage NCDs, if that money was diverted to food, we could reduce, the health budget. So at the end of the day, government will probably balance its budget, but with a healthier population. The other point I wanted to raise in the same vein is that I think we discussed this in our group, which is to have social marketing of nutritious food. Also, that should be generic, have government foot the bill and just take on the corporations in their own game, have some real slick advertising for nutritious foods, but we need to make sure the supply is there. So it has to be balanced. The supply side also must meet that demand, because demand is going to go up. But if the supply is not there, then people will just go back to their usual, way of doing life.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Simba. And I see as a comment here that in Zambia, actually, these sorghum millet cassava are really competing with subsidies for maize. And so is in production, actually, production inputs for production of these crops. There's a huge competition between these indigenous crops and maize. So I think it's a policy issue, as Simba just said, and we need to take it up. Why should we subsidize maize that amount of money and ignore sorghum, millet, and cassava? Another comment, as I saw someone had.
Hello.
Another comment. Yeah.
Hello.
Go ahead. Go ahead, please.
I'm Erojisu from Sierra Leone.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the workshop. I think it has been a very, very useful comments and presentations. It is very, very much very useful. The other issues also that we really need to consider in terms of food security issue is really the cultural aspect in Africa, as well as the attitude of the farmers in Africa. The attitude and cultural aspect of farmers in Sierra Leone, especially those in the rural areas, is not attractive for investment. Like, for example, in my own country, the low rate of loan repayment.
Can you be brief, Edward, so that we don't
run
out of time? Can you be brief?
Me?
No, we're getting you, but be brief.
Okay, it's the issue of loan repayment. We also have the cultural issues. We also have a lot of nutritious food in villages and communities, but they don't consume it. Either they sell it or it's allowed to rot. And we also have the issue of even investment also, just as I've said. So there are several issues. Yes, policies are important. We have had several policies across since several times, and we have several policies, but the implementation of those policies have been a very difficult thing. For brief, that is what I really want to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edward. Do we have any other contribution for now? There are some comments here from Maria Gross. There's also need to support production of traditional grains with the appropriate technologies, which reduce drudgery and labor involved in processing. I think we have technologies now coming up, or where processing of these indigenous crops is done easily, like cassava as well as sorghum and millet. And also there's a need to support research and development policies which enhance investment into prevalent pest control, especially for birds. And private sector needs to be highly involved. So these are some of the comments coming from the chat box. So I would like to wind up. Simba, do you have something burning? I see like you're coming on. No? Okay, if there are no further comments, I think it's high time that we end this. Okay, we have group 3 was the best group, Nonala Butelezi. Thank you very much. I think, I don't know what was the basis of that assessment. So we are coming towards the end of this session and day 2. And day 2 was actually mainly focusing on diets and data. Diet for health and data for decision making. And we've been shown that indigenous diets were diversified, full of micronutrients as well, and a lot of crops, domesticated and non-domesticated, because we've seen that forest products are also very important. And the current problem is that we have less diversified diet, energy loaded, limited micronutrients, and a lot of salt in the diets that are consumed at the moment. And we're reminded about the micronutrient problems that we have, also stunting, wasting, and obesity. And by the way, I think one of the hanging fruit that can be used to stimulate demand for indigenous foods or nutritious foods is the current situation of non-communicable diseases. And we see these people who are suffering from these diseases are now reverting to consuming our indigenous foods. So that's also an area that we can focus our attention. And there are quite a number of policy issues that are coming out in terms of making our nutritious foods affordable. There was a proposal for subsidies, but also looking at the school environment, and that can also be a policy issue as to how we generate demand for nutritious food through the school environment. And we could use that opportunity to really instill information and tests of indigenous foods in our school children, indigenous foods as well as nutritious foods. But then there was also an issue of data, that data in Africa is a challenge, a huge challenge. And this is simply because we don't have significant investment by governments on data generation. And this is based on the perspective or outlook of our political or policy makers, that probably they can make decisions without backing that decision by evidence. And I think next question would be, how can we stimulate demand for data and evidence for our leaders to make decisions based on that? So these are some of the issues that we are taking, we are carrying forward in terms of this policy dialogue. And I hope that would be able to really attain or achieve what we plan to achieve as far as shifting towards sustainable healthier diets in the near future. And I'm not talking of year after next, but tomorrow or probably yesterday. So with that, if there are any issues from the Secretariat, please, would like to thank you all for participating in this session and for all your contributions. And I hope from now on, we will not just wait for another dialogue. I think we'll continue to do whatever we are doing at the moment to actually start shifting towards sustainable and healthier diets. Thank you so much. And back to you, Kanto.
Sorry, Prof, there was a cut in here.
There was a?
Sorry, it was cutting on my hand and I just heard Kanto.
Oh, so I wasn't like being heard.
Oh, okay, all right.
So we are closing now, Kanto. Do you have any announcements or anything?
No, I think I don't have anything on my side. I think to invite everyone for our last day tomorrow, which will be focusing on capacity strengthening and yeah. So I think, yeah, tomorrow, same time, we will see you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.